So as you guys know, I kind of review the meta as is, and we kind of get to look at all the decks every Tuesday, but I figured this would be more in depth after we've gotten so much information of like 15 to 16 really high competitive decks. We're at the point in the game where there are good budget decks, there's good, high expensive tier decks, there's just good middle ground even between that are just good playing decks that players can enjoy for high caliber events and still do well. And that's finally huge for a lot of players, actually. At the end of the day, you need to be able to have the variety for players to be able to do well in any way, shape, or form budgets. And this proves the point here. Royal Knights being probably one of the highest caliber expensive decks in the game right now. I think, to be honest with you, that's just where it stands. The fact that you ended up with cards like Omnimon X Antibody that are really powerful in just general keyword soup. If we take a look here, you have Omnimon with Raid, Piercing, Blocker, and able to do Rush and May attack, which is huge. One of your Digimon gain Rush for the turn and attack without suspending. At the end of the day, a lot of players don't have, we didn't have this kind of effect before, and being able to have Raid, Piercing, and Blocker, all great tools, and at the end of your turn, just giving Rush and May attack without suspending, means that it deals a lot of damage in its own right. Omnimon X became one of the more expensive secrets just because of the power it wielded. Jesmon GX exists, Alphamon Oryukin mode. This deck just plays that Meazoo vibe that a lot of players enjoyed it back in the early game. It wasn't like that rookie, we had Meazoo, we had Rookie Rush, and then we had the stack decks like Greymon, Blue Omni, and Red Omni. This just brought back the feel for Meazoo just being able to play stuff at lower costs just because Yggdrasil allows it. At the end of the day, this gave players a feel for what they like. So if you like slamming just big bodies down that are just answer response, this is one of the decks for you. Now, this is probably one of the budgeter decks if you're not playing, multiple medieval Gallants. But if you're playing, Gallantmon and Gallantmon here as your high end and you just don't play medieval Gallant, this deck is relatively affordable. I think even if you don't even play the analog youths, the deck is super affordable. This card is a little expensive, but you don't really care for it. Memory boosts and stuff like that are a little bit expensive, and Digimon probably being one of the highest expensive cards, but it's up to you how you want to build the deck and play it. But this deck pops off just being able to, build a stack, swing in, Dark Hole after it attacks, as long as it survived, and then being able to play something on the board just leads into some crazy shenanigans, especially because you combo it with Gallantmon X Antibody. You basically slam down 2 Rush Gilas and then basically deal a couple more damage because you're going to be passing back turn. Even if you go over, you'll be going back to 0 most likely with just Gallantmon going off or just doing math with Gravity Crush. So all things do add up eventually and leads into a very powerful style of play. And I think players will adapt and evolve their lists from time to time. But this deck is super budget friendly because, again, the most expensive cards are these here and the promo. But the promo, you're going to get more and more as time goes on anyway. So, yeah, I mean, up to you how you want to build the deck. Now, Sakuyamon, another more mid-tier expensive. Everything but, Ruin Mode is cheap. Under $10, $15 cheap. So, keeping that in mind, that if you guys like comboing and building a mid-sized tier board, this deck is for you. Being able to produce tokens is huge for this deck. This one being able to Digivolve into Ruin Mode, blanketing your opponent and floodgating turn after turn, having access to Volder Arm and Ruin Mode makes this deck extremely scary, and your opponent has to play around it in ways or answer response, and you could easily shut them down in a turn with just being able to loop the Giant Greymon Ruin mode turns. Now, Gallantmon is another deck that a lot of players hit or miss on what they want to do with it, but this is another option for players with Gallantmon X, Gallantmon, both having great protection skills. This one being able to, as long as it's your opponent's turn, is unaffected by things. But this Gallantmon is basically, you know, while you have 0 or less memory, the Digimon isn't affected by your opponent's effects, you know, your turn basically. So yeah, I mean, being able to pop these two threats are always a good thing. I like that they are teching in Bond of Friendship base. I don't think that's supposed to be in here, but it is another option. I don't know why you're playing this, but you know, being able to, if you lose your stack, use Growlmon X antibody to play the Guillemon back out and just be able to search pieces and get back into it does add up to being some great value. And being able to have Gallantmon come in for free is huge in some circumstances as well. Now, another version of Gallant X is the blue based version. So this one focuses on just being a unblockable source. By placing one of your other Digimon as this bottom Digivolution, it unsuspends. You know, you get security +1 because most likely you're going to deal some decent damage. Blue base Gallantmon does have some legs. It combos in with the Hexablow and Mirage as extra protections, and it just leads into why Gallantmon X kinda is really solid. You know, a very powerful card. Having both red and blue as an option, it just feels like old school Omnimon, where you had that big boss Digimon ready to go. So yeah, I think this deck does extremely well into events as well. Now, we do have access to our good friend Imperialdramon. Blue-green Imperialdramon is one of those really good decks that I don't see disappearing out of the meta anytime soon. And again, depending on how you want to play it, this deck is super aggressive, being able to, you know, deal a bunch of damage a turn while still producing a floodgate-esque effect through Imperialdramon's, basically saying your opponent, when attacking, you know, suspend all your opponent's Digimon with as many or fewer Digi-evolutions as this Digimon, which, since you're a DNA deck, you're going to make them all suspend, most likely suspend, because you have the most resources. Then if DNAing, all your opponent's Digimon can't unsuspend until the end of turn, so basically locking the board with a floodgate. So if you notice that we do have a higher count in floodgates in this format, so they kind of just prevent your opponent from doing things, matching with Hexablow, being able to answer threats. You know, 3 Great Angels is another great deck into the format, just because it's able to manipulate life in ways that is really powerful. Being able to use like Magna, Angemon, being able to go to Dominion, and then basically combo off even more, being able to play another level 5. It can lead up to having some very sticky bodies. You know, Angelwomon Ace punishes any security moving, which you do constantly anyway in this deck. So being able to have these bodies manipulate with your security and be able to answer response everything, and the key backbone being like Shadow Seraphe, on top of it being able to force your opponent in bad situations. The only downside is that it protects through everything but battle. So if they're able to swing into Shadow Seraphe, this is a problem for a lot of players. Again, this deck has some expensive cards looking at Trubimon Ace, and that's really what bars a lot of players out of the deck, because this needs a solid reprint, to be honest. Now, you do have Galactimon being probably one of the better budget decks to walk into an event, because this thing's only like $2. This thing being the $20 card, and meaning this thing is bought at almost $100, and you're pretty decent. The rest is just bulk. I mean, the Venmons are $2 to $3 if you don't have them right away, which does add up. So that brings your total to probably like $115 for all this. Just be ready for that, because the Venmon count is what triggers that. But at the end of the day, Galactimon is a very powerful card in general. Being able to, you know, By placing 4 Venmon as text from this trash as a bottom Digivolution card, you may use 1 Ragnar Cannon from hand or trash without paying its cost. Start a main, delete one of your opponent's Digimon. All turns when this Digimon would lead the battle by returning 4 Venmon from his Digivolution to the bottom deck, it does not leave. So this thing having so much protection, it is 4 Venmon, so you get 1 protection naturally, and most likely you will have 2 protections. So this thing's sticking on the board at least through 2 attacks. It'll take a third to, you know, kind of remove it. Third removal of some sort. But with Ragnar Cannon being able to delete one of your opponent's Digimon with the lowest play cost, then this card in the battle area, you know, being able to delete one of your opponent's Digimon with the lowest play cost. If this fact didn't delete, trash the top card of your opponent's security stack. If so, that is 1 card left. So being able to strip your opponent's life down to 1 is huge. Now we do have Purple Hybrid coming back, guys. This deck being able to tech in the Gallants was huge. Being able to mill with the Dusk and Balgra combo is really important. Then they can kind of just go into superior mode if they don't, you know, delete, you know, an attack, delete 1 purple. By deleting 1 purple lower Digimon, delete all your opponent's Digimon at the lowest level. Being able to self-pop and do some crazy shenanigans is interesting. But, you know, you have like Matt Ishida being able to trash 1 card from your hand by using this 1 effect, by suspending this tamer, gain a memory. You know, when you trash a card, you gain some memory. So yeah, you're going to be trashing cards anyway. You have like the Koichi that's going to do it, and this Koichi, so comboing with this one extends your plays and gets you where you want to go. Yeah, you don't have the loop potential that you used to, but combinations with like Demonic Devastation is really interesting enough. Hunters seeing support. If you guys like a good deck that kind of can answer a lot, and on budget as well, because this is stupid budget. This is the antithesis of a budget deck. You know, Hunter Restaurant Superior Mode, being able to tuck something out of the way that your opponent has a big threat that usually has a decent protection, but being able to tuck something under a tamer makes it so your opponent can't really do much. You know, you do have Superior Mode with Raid and Piercing, and when Digivolving, this Digimon may attack all turns as an inheritable, gives 1000 DP, and is all turns this Digimon gets 1000 DP for each of his Digivolution cards. Since it does use the save, you do get to reduce evolution costs by tucking more pieces underneath, so you can get free evolves. This leads into being something really good. So yeah, now having basically this deck was waiting for its Volume 2 support. There was nothing holding this deck back besides that, and it just got its second wave, and boom, this thing is just really good. Now, Mastemon is a newer deck that has been popping up. Yellow Maste, just with the new promo, is really nasty. Then if DNAing by placing 1 other Digimon or Tamer as the bottom security, trash your opponent's top security stack when Digivolving when attacking. By trashing the top security stack, you may play 1 purple or yellow Digimon card with 6000 DP from your hand or trash without paying its cost. So being able to spam out, you know, the Angemons or Lady Devies to lead into more combos, this deck can literally put your opponent on the back burner very quickly and just make them have a bad day. The fact that we have barriers, we have ways of kind of searching out your pieces, still needs a little bit more in my opinion, but this deck does a lot of work for very little investment sometimes. But this deck is stupid expensive right now just because of the hype. Mirai is just stupid expensive. The promo stupid expensive. This thing's $11 to $12 a pop. You know, this deck is not for the faint of heart. If you're a diehard Mastemon fan, this is definitely great support, especially since it will get something more. Now, Red Purple Imperialdramon doesn't seem like it's doing much in the high competitive, but it is another option for the player base that wants to do it. You know, this one got first place in 254 players in China. I think that's pretty good to take the leap here and say, you know, teching in like Paladin Mode Ace and the Imperialdramon Fighter Mode Ace is really good tech options that can lead to being something really beneficial. You know, you have Analog Boy, Matt Ishida being able to gain memory, Miss Memory Boost, Calling from Darkness, Demonic Devastation, just being able to get those extra bit of turns really does help out at the end of the day. And being able to just answer response most threats, because this thing is self-deleting and then plays out bodies, is really, really good. So I think at the end of the day, well, if your opponent answers it in mid security, you can easily get right back into the fray, especially because with Shadramon, it'll be able to play the body that it wants. You know, you do have partition, which will help your deck out, but at the end of the day, you have so much great value going on. Now, again, Ancient Blue Hybrid is another option that I think, besides the Ruin Mode, is another budget option that can lead to being something useful for a lot of players, because at the end of the day, it's what you make of your decks. And this is another aggressive style play, being able to strip your opponent's security with your top end, being able to strip it and bounce the threat off the board. You know, anytime a card is added, it kind of does this. So, you know, it punishes your opponent, and you have ways of bouncing and keeping your opponent at bay. And I think at the end of the day, it's up to you. Now, Leviathan is another great deck that basically plays a big hungry alligator that just wants to delete everything off the board and control the board state. You know, being able to bite and crush Leviathan, being able to do Leviathan X shenanigans, and you know, you got Ruin Mode being Ruin Mode, all great stuff across the board. You know, you got Anubismon, Cerberus X, Deltamon, you know, Lotmon X Antibody, Psychmon, Gazamon, all great things across the board. You know, Leviathan's just going to do Leviathan things, just basically keep your opponent's board low and minimized, and you know, even just having Leviathan X be able to help clear board as well is all great things that this deck wants. Another deck that is popping in and out right now is the Phoenixmon deck. So this one uses the bottom end of the, you know, Growlmon and Growlmon X line, and it just goes off from there. Just something that proves that the engine for the Gallantmon, just being able to spit out more bodies, because this thing is going to self-delete, means that basically, because it has this tax on deletion, you can combo off, get another Rush Gila out, so you can get 3 Rush Gilas out in a turn. Well, you're only playing 2, so you can get 2 Rush Gilas out very comfortably, because you're going to be self-destructing again. So you'll have 2 Gilas from, you know, the when attacking activation that basically treats all your, you know, on deletions as real Digievolution when attacking skills, and then once you pop, you get to punish your opponent even further. So, you know, trash the top card of your opponent's security stack, go Ruin X Antibody does the same thing. So basically, they just converted the bottom end and top end into this. So it does come up from time to time, and with Phoenixmon and Phoenixmon X just being this powerhouse and getting more bodies out, I think we'll see long-term wise, this deck might pop in more and more. Galaxy is another deck option for a lot of players that wants a little bit more of a bottom end draw engine that's just really pretty decent. You know, being able to search and get pieces and go off the Galaxy small engine, and then leads into basically, you know, you're gonna have to draw your top end because you can't search it, but at the end of the day, you know, you have Apollomon being able to apply pressure, Mirage to help defend, Hexablow being able to defend, you know, Gallantmon X be able to defend, you have Invisimon being able to do Invisi shenanigans, you have Paladin Mode Ace, and you have Omnimon X as extremely powerful level 7 top ends, which you could possibly go into for free. But also, there's one other deck that I think we should probably talk about, and I don't think I really want to, but it is another deck that's doing well. So Magna, let's do armor. So Armors does extremely well in the format as well, just because the abilities that it gain in the matchups is still ridiculous. You know, let's see if we can pull one that is, if you guys own these cards. This is another thing. I won't suggest a very expensive deck just because Magna X is like the original turtle deck, right? deck is very powerful. It was using Cool Boy and Omeka to combo in before, but now with this new support that it got in BT-21, it has a lot going for it in the right direction. Magna X is a very powerful card with combinations with Genai's house, just being able to boost it up to make sure that it gets around threats. If you own Magna X, the deck, you played it. But if you don't, I don't expect you to spend money on this. This deck is very powerful, and your opponent has to be able to deal with it. But guys, hopefully you enjoyed the video, you know, and you find it valued information. So guys, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you next one. Peace.